Hi, I'm Yasmin Owusu, and this is my producer, Charlie Kesenek.
But I'm your husband, and you're using all my stuff right now. What are you talking about?
So anyway, I've been looking for a one-stop shop podcast for wellness, amateur sociology, psychology, pop culture, and whatever else sparks my interest. So I created one. We are limited to no lanes. We hit the gas and get into it. This is Peaked. Press play. Hi, welcome back to Peaked Podcast. I'm Yasmin, your host. I'm back for another week of Peaked. Before I get into the meat of the episode, I know I've said it ad nauseum for those of you who are frequent listeners, but I did live in New York City for most of my adult life. I moved there after college when I was like 21. I mean, I dropped out of college, so it was early. And I lived there until I was like 38 or 37 or something like that before I moved here to Austin. And let me tell you, I was impressed and excited to hear that Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani, mayor of Mamdanistan, as people like to call it, mayor of New York City, was paying people out of tax dollars about $35 an hour, I think it was, to shovel and plow and just get rid of the snow in New York City on the streets, in all 5 boroughs, I imagine, get rid of all that. And, you know, I applaud him. I applaud him for getting that done. I'm happy to see tax dollars be used for something that actually helps the people in the city and helps the city run better, helps people get to work, you know, keeps the socks out of the black water. And I'm just amazed that, again, people can have a fucking problem with that. I'm sorry to drop a hard F, but it is bananas when I'm hearing people be like, he's using tax dollars to pay someone $35 an hour to plow. Let me compose myself. What would you like tax dollars to go towards? As someone who is a veteran of the trenches of New York City, I'm frankly happy for everyone. And I'm a full-blown hater, but I'm happy for everyone that they don't have to actually spelunk to work through like rivers of just brown, slushy water eventually. But before that, actually just walking in snow that freezes you no matter what kind of boot you're wearing. It's going to refrigerate your feet to the point where you might get frostburn when you finally get into maybe a warm subway if you're lucky enough. But you have a problem with that. However, I did live there for 16 years plus, and I just stared at the same rat on the subway and watched brown liquid leak out of the ceiling of the MTA, out of the subway, and just, piles upon piles of garbage just hanging out everywhere on every freaking street. And I'm just hearing that everyone is getting bonuses, and, they're getting, executives are getting raises at the MTA, which is, by the way, it's like that's the subway system and the bus system. Basically, all transportation in New York City is called the MTA. Anyway, they're all getting bonuses. They're all getting, whatever, higher salaries while, I'm staring at Pizza Rat 24/7. So finally, when someone decides to do something about something for, the people the residents of this city, we have to have a problem. I'm not asking you to become a Leninist or, become a socialist or anything of the sort. But simply give credit where due. He got something done and he got it done well, and he used it with tax dollars that are often going to, it seems like, just making rich people who are making enough richer, and the city, remains the same, essentially. Like, it's still the same amount of graffiti. It's still the same amount of trash piling up. It's still the same horrible smells. It's still the same, hot subway car that doesn't have AC and, doesn't have heat in the winter. It's the same. We all know the state of the Canal Street subway stop and how, if you ever can't afford a sauna membership, just go in there in summer and cook underground. And that hasn't changed in the 20 years that I've been aware of it. Anyway, I give kudos to that. However biased my kudos may be, I'm not going to get into the, snowball fight gate. I'm just going to stay out of that one. I live in Austin now. We have our own problems, We have Hot Wheels over there that we need to get rid of. So I'll stay in my lane with that one. But yeah, now I will move on. I did want to talk a little bit about the Mexican cartel war that's going on right now. Obviously, I'm not going to try to get into the nitty gritty of it. This is not necessarily something I'm super versed in. I'm simply just wanting to maybe give my take on the tonal nature of how a lot of us in the United States, in our joint American landmass, are deciding to treat this subject matter. I know I like laughed earlier. I tend to have like nervous laughter around serious topics. I do not find anything about a cartel pop off funny whatsoever. It's extremely scary, and it's happening in the state of Nayarit, which I've been to before. I've been to Sayulita, I've been to Puerto Vallarta, which are all kind of touristy places, let's say. So it's happening in that state, and there's argument about whether people who are kind of saying, should you go to Mexico at all? Mexico's huge. I don't know that I would necessarily, if I heard there was like, a gang war going on in DC, like hesitate to go to Tennessee. You know what I mean? Like it's pretty far. Like I think, for example, the other destination that people go to a lot, like Cancun, is like 24 hours of drive to get there from Puerto Vallarta. So I think maybe thinking that the reach of this unrest is going to get all the way there is far-fetched. But I don't fault anyone living in Mexico, wherever they're living, to feel worried or unsafe. And, maybe they're not, obviously not everyone's in a gang, so maybe they're not as knowledgeable about what territory wars what the implications of that could be. I mean, essentially what happened was a big cartel boss was taken out. And what happens with that, to my understanding, is that now, so obviously he's not the only one in his operation. So the other people in his operation want to consolidate power, keep it. And then I'm sure a lot of other cartels working in the area want to kind of power grab that now that this group are weakened. And I'm sure that will cause a lot of people to be pushed out of their territories as other people grab stuff. And so I understand being concerned if you're in a close by city, if you're not exactly in Puerto Vallarta or wherever. I understand being concerned. But I think when we're getting to like, Puebla or something crazy, we don't need to really worry. Mexico is, again, pretty enormous. This is not my issue, though, but I do think there's sometimes a little bit of I don't want to say like racial, it's like some kind of cultural bias or insensitivity. Call it what you want. I'm not really trying to go too hard with this, but I think maybe there's a bit of a ick that I get when people are constantly talking about danger in Mexico, when we have such dangerous states in the United States and dangerous areas of those states. For example, like when I'm going to Mexico, everyone is like, be careful, gun violence. I mean, I went to New Orleans, nobody said anything, right? And there's a lot of murders and armed robberies and stuff there too. And, we have that going on in many cities. We have that going on in Ohio. We have that going on, I could go on and on. We have a lot of states that are not particularly safe from gun violence and gang violence here as well. And so I think there are plenty of places in Mexico where you don't necessarily need to be on high alarm when something's happening, like, an 8-hour drive, a 12-hour drive, a 24-hour drive away. But maybe that's for someone who actually resides in the country to talk about more than me. Let me try to get back on track. What I do want to say is everyone kind of bemoaning their canceled trip, or like, I was supposed to go to Puerto Vallarta. I was supposed to go to Sayulita. Don't nobody give an F where you were supposed to go. People are dying. People's businesses are being burned down. This is not your moment. This is not your moment, Jessica, to talk about how you were going to take your bikini pictures now that you finally took Ozempic. This is not your time. This is a serious thing. People are in danger. Families are getting, ousted. People are running away from the areas. People's businesses that they've had for years and years are being burnt to the ground. No one cares if you can turn up at the resort. So I don't know how we can just continue to be so tone deaf as an entire country, but somehow we manage every single time to get the tone completely wrong and to emphasize completely the wrong thing. I mean, we have such insane things going on in general in this country that you whining about a Mexico trip is, even within our country, without the context of that, is literally insane and bananas. But then add to that like people are actually losing their lives. I did feel the need to, expound about that. But we're going to jump into the meat of this episode now. And that is that I watched with Charlie, producer husband Charlie, I watched the America's Next Top Model documentary, ANTM. If you're not familiar, this was a phenomenon in the 2000s, the 2000s. It was a phenomenon. And this was a modeling competition helmed by Tyra Banks, who is a very successful top model, America's Next Top Model. She would know who's next because she was one before. So it was a show hosted by Tyra Banks, and she had two co-hosts that were a regular co-hosts from the very beginning. And one was, I guess maybe they had like other headings other than just being like co-hosts. Like there was Jay Manuel, who was very about artistic direction, I guess. And like his background was being a makeup artist. He was her makeup artist at one point. And then there was Miss J, as we lovingly called him. I think now maybe they would be them, but at the time it was him, or sometimes her playfully. But we'll just say Miss J for now. Who was teaching the girls how to walk. I mean, was a very well-known and utilized coach in model walking. Before this, taught Tyra how to walk when she was like 14 or something. So they were on this show with Tyra. And then there was also this guy, Nigel, who was a photographer. And, he took photos as a photographer does. Anyway, just giving a bit of background on the show so you can maybe listen to this episode if you never watched it. So I did watch this at the time. And when I was hearing about this documentary, just like on the social media, on the TikToks, whatever, just people being like, oh my God, especially Gen Z who were not as familiar with the show as like when it was out on UPN, I used to watch it on my no cable TV with the bunny ears, living in like New York City, and they had these marathons on random weekdays where they would just show like 5 seasons of it, like well into it. I mean, it was running for a really long time. I mean, it had like 24 seasons or something crazy. So if you're not as familiar with it, but anyway, I think a lot of Gen Z have gotten familiar just through like YouTube clips and like, I'm sure that you can still find reruns on Peacock or something like that, or Hulu. But they very much have locked into, I guess it comes up in the documentary that during COVID, a lot of people rewatched episodes, or in the case of younger people, they discovered episodes because they were just binging. Everyone was stuck at home. And oh my God, does this show not age well, right? And I think that was, the overarching. I still don't know if it's overarching or overarching. This is going to be me. Why am I using the word if I don't know how to say it? It's insane. But anyway, this was like kind of the pervasive, there we go, dialogue around it was like, oh my God, this didn't age well. Like there's certain photo shoots that were extremely problematic, and I'll get into that more. And just a lot of just the tone of the show, the way that they would speak to the women, and the show in general. It does not fit into what would be appropriate or would air without incident today. And it made me want to grab the mic that day, but I have to record when I have to record, and just be like, it was not chill at the time. Okay. Like I distinctly remember, like we didn't really have, when I first started watching it, like we didn't really have like a whole lot of like smartphone, social media stuff to like, kiki on. And I wasn't necessarily one to call people, but like I remember distinctly discussing how insane it was with my friends, whether it was like through emails. And I mean, we definitely texted on our little flip phones and our like, T-Mobile, whatever slides. And I would watch it with my sister because we shared an apartment when we were in our early 20s. And we absolutely knew it was bananas at the time. It absolutely was problematic and insane. I'm so sorry. We still have this cedar situation going on, but it's going to wrap up really soon. So I'm just going to have a lot of vocal fry and a lot of hoarseness, and we're just going to barrel through it. But we would talk about how nuts it was at the time. So I really want to take away this narrative that like back then it was totally fine if someone's like mom had died and they go on a reality show competition for you to make their photo shoot, them being inside of a grave. Like I'm not exaggerating. This is the kind of thing that would happen. Someone would say as like their like, I don't want to say sob story, but just as their story of like they're overcoming something and they're trying to like audition for this show. They'd be like, yeah, my mom tried to kill her or killed herself, or someone shot my mom and that's why she's not with us anymore. And that's a big trauma in my life. Next thing you know, their photo shoot is them with a bullet wound, like a makeup artist did it on their head. I mean, it was bananas. I mean, to the point where people are putting out like hilarious videos of like, this is what Tyra would do if you said that your mom like wanted to abort you. And it's like someone like posing with hangers. But like, it's not even a joke. This is literally what was happening on this show. And that's not even like the most of it. I mean, there were just like actually harmful, horrible things that happened on this show. I mean, they did detail on the show that there was a girl who was like sexually assaulted on camera, essentially. Like she was extremely intoxicated, a very young girl, very green, like from a really small town. And she was very, very thin. And I think that's important to note. She hadn't eaten all day. She was very, very thin. She drank about 2 bottles of water in Italy. Did I say bottles of water? That's probably all she had all week. No, she had 2 bottles of wine, according to her, if not more, and was in a hot tub drunk with these like young Italian guys. And one of them, I guess, ends up heavily making out with her and being very sexual with her in the hot tub. And she was blacked out. And obviously I believe her when she says that. Why would anyone lie? And the storyline around that, not that there should have been a storyline. Someone should have stepped in production. This was being filmed. And then when she goes into another room in the shower and she's clearly blackout drunk, someone should have stepped in. And I don't necessarily want to get into a blame game with the other contestants, them being so young and maybe not understanding that she was as wasted as she was. But I do think a show now would, at least if they don't care about these girls, which maybe they still don't, I think they would understand the implications for the production of not intervening and making sure that everything's safe here. It just seemed insane to me they let that happen, knowing how intoxicated she was and just how frail this girl was. Like, there's no way she could have really been that lucid with the amount of alcohol she consumed. Either way, the storyline around that, very pushed by the judges, especially Tyra, was, oh, you cheated on your boyfriend. She didn't cheat on her boyfriend. She was sexually assaulted in a hot tub while completely intoxicated. And y'all decided to continue to film it, put it out, interview her, film her like heaving, crying, like crumpled over on her bed. It was really, really heartbreaking to watch. That was just disturbing. And watching Tyra Banks like go up to them at a table later on that day and like just really inauthentically try to throw in like, oh, I got cheated on once, to bring up the conversation about cheating, when really it should have been a conversation about sexual assault and lack of consent. So that was really deeply disturbing. And there were also some medical procedures on a lighter but still horrifying note. It's insane to me that orthodontistry was being applied to a reality competition show, but they were closing people's tooth gaps on this show, opening there was this one girl, Danielle, who, by the way, stunning, should be a top model, should have been a top model. I actually saw her in person because I worked at this taco place in Brooklyn, and she came in as a customer, I think very soon after her season aired. And she was stunning in person, like beyond. But I mean, you can see that even on this show so many years later, I mean, she's like, I don't know, 15 years older or something like that. She still is like, could be a model right now and could pass for like, 28. Anyway, she had a diastema, or like a gap in her teeth, and Tyra was very insistent and basically bullied her into closing it on camera, or partially closing it. Only partially closing it because she held out and was like, no, I think this could be like, it was part of her. I don't even think she felt the need to justify it. It's how her teeth look, and it shouldn't be a problem, right? But to Tyra it was, and she was like, all they're going to see is your gap, and like was very mocking of her about it. And, I thought she was beautiful with the gap and beautiful with it half closed. And I thought it was really interesting that seasons later, as they detailed on the show, they opted to widen a girl's gap, saying it could be so Danielle is a black girl, and they were like, close your gap, you look crazy. And then this white girl was told that she should widen it seasons later because it could be her signature, like Lauren Hutton. So pick a lane, but she berated this girl, being like, you either want to make it or you don't, and you won't take notes, and I'm trying to tell you what I know. Insanity. And, I always allegedly think thought that Tyra seemed unhinged and completely nuts. From the beginning of watching this show, there's just something about her demeanor that has always rubbed me the wrong way. And the beginning of the documentary, I thought it seemed like Tyra had a lot of say in the tone of it and the questions she was asked. And she wasn't really pushed in a way that I think that she should have been. But I do think the producers of this documentary and the interviewers see what we see, and we're trying to highlight it in a quiet way. Like the way the show starts essentially is like her sitting there and being like, are we starting? And like very just like, stone-faced, setting up, asking kind of like what she should launch into. And then as soon as the camera is up in her mind, she thinks it's when it's up, she just kind of changes and gets this like little smile on her face, this like creepy little smile, which you'll see throughout this documentary that she just gets on her face, which is like this pageant, inscrutable little smile. And it just was really telling to me of how much of a performer she is. And you'll see just the through line of that, of when she's asked tough questions about the really deeply problematic and harmful things that she's done. And even just personal things like her not reaching out to Miss J when Miss J had a stroke, or, not maybe, I don't know, keeping contact with the other J. Like, are you ever going to call him? The way he was fired wasn't necessarily that copacetic. It's that little smile. And then this voice that she will put on where it's like, it's a whispery, like caring voice. And it's very artificial. And I just find her whole presentation, especially around such difficult subject matter, to be so inauthentic, and so transparently so. I really do see why her acting career never took off. She's a terrible actress, and she seems to be bad at acting like a human being with empathy. And it really made me think, my God, does she have maybe a low empathy thing? Allegedly, everything is my opinion, and not fact. And I've never evaluated Tyra as a psychiatrist, nor could I, because I'm not one. But she was really kind of giving a low empathy, high performance individual. And it was like chilling, frankly. The way that she was able to see, even if you didn't have all the details, just knowing that this girl who was assaulted is crumpled and like sad, has just had this horrible conversation with her boyfriend where she had to say that she had had sexual intercourse with someone else. And she didn't even really know how to frame it, because I think she was just so young, right? And she just felt shame and felt like it was her fault, even though it clearly was not. And she'd had this really just horrible, traumatizing night, and had been weeping. And I know that Tyra knew this when she decided to go up to her and just be like, hey, girl, my God, has anyone ever been cheated on? I have. Has anyone cheated? And then this girl obviously has to say that that's what she did. I couldn't believe that that's a reaction that you could have. I actually couldn't believe that's a way you could behave to someone who is in that kind of distress. It really was. It was bone chilling, frankly. And I found her little smile to be very chilling. And there was a particular point where she was talking about this other girl. And the tone was that we just didn't do well enough for her at the time, and she should have been helped more in something. And the way that Tyra was like, and I just really, I tried to give her the information that I had at the time. Oh, I'll tell you what the incident was. And this was also terrible. There was a photo shoot where a girl was, she was in a photo with a male model. And this male model was really handsy, was being very creepy to her beforehand, being very pushy, asking her for a number. This was not just how you kind of position yourself as a model and like you have to no, before they were shooting, before the camera was up, he was uncomfortably getting close to her, like, being very persistent. She was being very, had said that she had a boyfriend and she wasn't interested. It was being very firm and very clear that she was not interested in any sexual advances from him. And he continued to put them on her. And when the camera went up and she's taking these photos, he takes as an opportunity to act as though, because it's a photo shoot, that's why he's grabbing her, but he's grabbing her legs, all things that are not being directed by, the photographers or by any creative director at all. No one's saying grab her legs. The other male models that are in the shot are not doing that. And he's obviously being very lecherous and creepy. And she's showing that she's uncomfortable with her body and trying to adjust herself to take different kinds of photos. And he's just aggressively doing that to the point where she has to stop. And kudos to her for doing that. It can be really difficult to want to advocate for yourself in moments like that, especially at such a young age and especially in an industry you're new to. But I really commend her for basically saying, hey, this is happening. This guy's making me uncomfortable. I don't feel comfortable in this photo shoot. And she was essentially dismissed at the time. And then later in judging, when they go before the panel of judges, she was basically told by Tyra, like, you need to just like put a smile on your face and like play along and playfully brush people off. She did that. Before the photo shoot actually started, when this guy was being aggressively hitting on her. She was very kindly, gigglingly, girlily, being like, no. It did not work. This man was not interested in her consent. This man was not interested in what her comfort level was with her body, and brushed it off. And then it was brushed off in the photo shoot, and she was forced to be groped on camera by this creep that was groping her in no way just because of a photo shoot. Before that was being extremely creepy. And then Tyra's like, laugh it off. Okay, Gilead, we'll laugh it off, huh? I mean, it just didn't age well, and it wasn't great at the time. I don't remember that particular episode, and there are a billion episodes, so maybe I just didn't see it. Either way, my pillow just fell down. But either way, I thought it was ridiculous what Tyra said to her at the time, and I don't think she can lean on the times being different for that. It was not a time where if a guy is being extremely creepy, you should just play along with it. That's ridiculous. It's not 1942. And her response to that was a very creepy, I was just trying to give her the information I had. And yes, we should have done better for her, but that's what I knew at the time. And I wish I was exaggerating by how inauthentic and just acting and just pandery and just like gross her performance of that was. It was so clearly insincere, and I don't know if she really believes that this pageant girl act is like coming across caring, but it really, I can't imagine she does. She's being so tight-lipped and so, well, I don't know if I can talk about Jay. Like, I'm just disturbed by her in general, and I was the entire documentary. And it kind of, I was just going to talk about that essentially. I mean, those huge things that happened, like a couple of sexual assaults, some really horrible photo shoots that brought up people's trauma, just constant, like if someone was afraid of heights, you better believe the next episode was going to be them jumping off a building. Other than that, the safety concerns during this show was not at all a thing that was okay at the time. A girl almost got hypothermia in a pool. You have to understand these girls are often 100 pounds and 5'10", and like may sometimes under 100 pounds, soaking wet, literally in this case, soaking wet. And this girl almost got hypothermia, and it was nuts. And then there was also, I remember there was a girl who got, I think she's on freaking Southern Charm now, but this white woman got a weave sewn into her head, which by the way, I'm not really sure that is the braiding and weave sewing. I don't think that's a necessary thing. I don't think that's usually how white women get their hair. They get extensions, but I think they do them differently usually, because braiding can really be damaging and painful to white people's texture of hair. It's just generally not recommended. It can kind of pull their hair out of their head. And that's precisely what it did. They braided her head so tight that it was like pulling up from her skull and like making sores. And it was just so incredibly itchy, and it was just nuts. Like, so they did that. They like harmed that woman. They did surgeries on people. It was just, there was a girl who got a flesh-eating bacteria. And granted, they were they were in a lake, and sometimes people get flesh-eating bacteria. I'm not saying production is necessarily responsible for that happening, and I don't think that maybe that's a contingency you should generally be worried about. So I understand that could happen, especially in summer. But the tone around that was that she was gross. everyone just like was filming being like, ew, she's gross. Like, oh my God, what's going on with her face? She's gross. And it seemed to take way too long for them to give her medical attention. I mean, it just was progressing and like eating her flesh. Like, I'm nervously laughing again, but it was crazy. And this was not brought up on the show. So just understand, it made an imprint in my head 14 years ago, enough to be telling you this now. So I want everyone to know who is now either watching this documentary or who during COVID rewatched or discovered this show. We thought it was crazy at the time. I thought Tyra was crazy at the time. I remember when she interviewed Naomi Campbell, who she would just always talk about how she was a bully and she like tried to kick her out of the industry and she only wanted to be the only Black girl. And like Tyra Banks just had a bone to pick with Naomi Campbell. And I think she finally had her on her talk show. And it just, that all clicked for me. And this was years ago again. I mean, if it wasn't 12 years ago, it was more than that. It definitely wasn't less than 12 years ago. She had her on her talk show, which I think happened at the same time as America's Next Top Model. And it reinforced this idea to me that she has narcissistic traits, and a lot of narcissistic people have victim mentality. And Naomi Campbell was also super young when she started modeling. Tyra was younger, a younger generation who came into it a few years after Naomi Campbell, but they've both been in this cutthroat industry. And I think the amount of blame she's putting on this girl or woman who didn't really have that much more agency herself, and who also had to make sure that she could pay her bills, and, you know, who they're pitting these women against each other. I understand being like, hey, you weren't so nice. Hey, you like cut me out of certain things. But the way she just kind of couldn't let it go. And it just seemed like no amount of like explanation of where this woman was at or apologies was going to be enough. She just needed to be like, you're a bitch and I'm nice. And like, I mean, this woman, after those years of being treated however she was treated in the modeling industry, decided to start a reality show just to exact her sadism on all these girls and be like, can you survive it like I did? That seems to be what she's doing, essentially. It's like, how far can I beat these girls down till they know how I felt, and will they survive it? It's like Survivor, the model edition or something crazy. I mean, her famous scene where she's screaming at this one girl, Tiffany, where she's like, we were rooting for you. It's like memed. We're all rooting for you. The reason that she's screaming at this girl is because when she's eliminated, 5 minutes after she's eliminated, she chooses to go up to the other girls and be like, oh, this happens. And like, I'm not going to let it get me down. She's screaming at her to take it more seriously. And she does not owe you a breakdown, Tyra. Like, if you are putting these girls through all this stuff to show how strong you were and how you survived it and how you can just brush over sexual offenders and do whatever you're doing, telling a girl like, oh, just skip the burger bun and whatever, especially as a woman who like later in her career was like not necessarily considered the weight standard, that just seemed really rich. I mean, I think even as she was talking to this girl at the time, she was still modeling. She was still doing a Victoria's Secret. And she was definitely not in a sample size. And I'm not fat shaming Tyra whatsoever. She was a beautiful woman, but she was not a sample size herself. So when she's being like, you can control your weight, you can control this. I mean, apparently not, because here you are, right? And you don't fit into those standards now yourself. So that was like very rich. And I also thought, I understand that the modeling industry has its insane standards that it has of how thin and how tall and the look that people have to have. And it's harsh and they're brutal when you get into that modeling industry, and they're rigid. And at the time they didn't have plus size departments, and they didn't have all of this, and they didn't have all of that. I understand that. And I understand that that's part of like whether you can make it as a model or not. Now, what I don't understand is not eliminating people who can't fit into that standard and who do not believe fit into that standard in the audition period that happens before you even start filming. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of girls that line up and go through this audition process. And we don't see hundreds and hundreds of women on America's Next Top Model. You see like, I don't know, 10 that you just see in the auditions that they cut and they don't actually end up getting on the show. And like, 20 or something that actually end up going through the show process. So rather than get them onto the show and then just berate and humiliate them for either being too short, being too overweight, looking too old, and just making them feel like crap about it. Tell them that they do not fit the standard of the modeling industry. And by the way, they're going to be harsher on you than we are. So we may as well just tell you what's realistic now, and just don't choose to be a sadistic monster and humiliate them through 5 episodes for drama. So like that was a crazy thing to me. It's like, yes, you can blame the modeling industry all you want, but you are the ones who chose to tell these people that they're in the running and then just put them on camera and just like make them feel like shit for like however they look. That doesn't make sense in the modeling industry. It's just nuts. But yeah, I was going to say, watching Tyra and just seeing these like weird tendencies, like her sort of like the facial expressions that felt very inauthentic, the voice that felt very inauthentic, my perception that she lacks empathy, that she seemed to lack empathy, that she seemed to lack remorse, that she didn't seem to care that, you know, her ex co-host got fired unceremoniously and didn't, you know, follow up with them and didn't check in on one of the Jays when they had a stroke and etc. Right? It made me think of, I had seen a clip of Candace Owens, who, you know, I'm not a fan, but broken clocks are right twice a day, right? But I saw this clip of her talking about Erica Kirk and how uncomfortable it is to watch her, whatever side of, I don't even want to say side. I mean, I'm not happy that anyone gets killed, and I'll just leave it at that. I'm obviously disagree heavily. I mean, I think it's obvious to anyone who listens to this. I disagree heavily with Charlie Kirk's politics and also his morals. Do you disagree with someone's morals? I find his moral seemed abhorrent to me, as do Candace Owens in many ways. That being said, she was talking about how even people who agree with Erica Kirk, even people who sympathize or believe themselves to sympathize with Erica Kirk, often find themselves uncomfortable watching her and how she operates. And I guess what came out of that conversation was her just talking about this other woman who had written an article and who had basically said that the reason why is because she exhibits traits of a psychopath. And there's something about the lack of alignment between what is being attempted to convey, which is like empathy, sadness, human emotions, let's say, and what you're actually getting back, what you're actually feeling from how they look, from how their eyes, from just how they speak. And I'm not saying Tyra's a psychopath, but I think she might be allegedly a something path, some cluster B situation, because I really feel the same way. I find her so uncomfortable and almost scary to watch. And before, you know, anyone lawyers up, I think I will leave it at that. And I definitely recommend giving that documentary a watch. And I also want to again emphasize to anyone younger who was not aware of the show at the time, or anyone even my age who didn't watch it at the time, we knew it was crazy then. It was well known for being an unhinged, insane, problematic show then. Maybe more so now, but also then. All right, I'll leave you. I did want to say next, we're going to have a special extra episode this week. So this airs on Tuesday, and on Thursday, we're going to have husband producer Charlie on, because he is releasing his new album for his band Symmetry, which is spelled Symmetree, so like Symmetry. He has another album that's already out. Check it out everywhere you get music. It's available. And then he is coming out with a new album, which is called The Gravity of Hope, and that will be out next Friday. So if this is Tuesday, it's this Friday. And I'm going to have him on, and I interviewed him, and it's very formatted like just a formal interview. I have questions, but it's a great conversation. And we talk a lot about his creative process and how that's evolved. So it's not just purely only talking about an album, but also just a musician and a creative and how they operate as a creative. And I think you're going to love it. And on that episode, you'll hear a little bit of his music at the beginning and a little bit at the end, and definitely join us for that special episode. But that wasn't going to stop me from giving you this brain rot one too on Tuesday, as expected. All right, I'll see you next time.